We think that we can heal grief alone. I can think about it in my thoughts by myself in my room and cry alone in my closet, and grief will go away. Fuck no. Grief goes away once dealt with others. And I'm not telling you to go to a grief support group. Literally, just talk about it. Talk about death, your close ones dying with other people. They'll love it. They'll want to talk about it. That's the only way we can heal. If you use grief as an excuse to just not talk about it and be isolated and never deal with it, you're losing the most beautiful way to connect with someone. Connecting with another human being over a loss you can experience it is the most intimate, connecting experience ever. Please go out there and talk to people about grief. It's the only way we can make sense out of it and deal with it. Hello everyone, welcome to the New Age Sage podcast. I'm going solo again just because I've had some messages on my heart that I wanted to share, and when I'm interviewing people, it's hard for me to go into these topics as in depth as I can go solo, and this one is probably the most prevalent one on my heart, which is the topic of grief. And it's one of those things where we have no idea how to fucking talk about it. Zero. Our culture is so averse to death as a whole topic. No one talks about their own death. They don't talk about the fact that they could die one day and how to live a life in the fact that that's a reality, right? Like once you realize I can die, it opens a door to how can I actually live my life in the way I want to, right? We don't even face that. So most people go through life not even thinking about their own death, which is wild. And there's books that talk about how everyone's fear and anxiety is actually a reflection of them not accepting their own death, because the only fear we have as humans is the fear of death. So if you don't face it and understand it's a possibility, you will always be afraid of everything, and that transfers to other people, right? If you have someone close to you die and you've never thought about death, it's going to be a harrowing, wild, confusing experience, right? But other cultures such as Tibetan culture or Eastern cultures, death is a part of everyday practice. So once death comes, they celebrate, which is a little wild to me, but it's not a big thing. It's like, oh, it's a part of everyone's life. We all die. We all have people we love who die. It's ingrained in our reality. However, in the Western world, I live in America and Texas, in many English-speaking languages, Europe, Australia, it's not part of culture. It's like this, it's perceived as the most negative part of reality. Therefore, it's suppressed, denied, and shut out, right? So my effort here is to try and normalize the conversation, right? Because if you're talking to someone, I've noticed it, when you mention grief openly and the other person has experienced a loss, their eyes open. They're like, oh my God, I can finally talk about this thing I have never talked about, because the door's open. Once our culture starts to figure out that we can only heal grief through conversation, people are going to start talking about it. So in my effort to start that conversation, I'm going to speak about my experience with grief. Tell my story with how it happened to me. I'm not dead, obviously. In some ways I am. But I'm going to begin by telling you my story. And hopefully in that vulnerable share, I can inspire you to feel heard, seen, and then go to someone else to talk about it and start this chain reaction of talking about grief, because it's the only way we can cope with it, by talking about it. And the fact that we don't talk about it is why it's so shocking and harrowing when it happens. And after I've discussed my experience, and the juice of this episode is basically the formula I created to heal, can never really fully heal grief, but to deal with grief. So I'll mention my story and then go into how the fuck can we actually deal with this beast that none of us have any idea how to deal with, and how the common sentiments around 5 stages of grief and are all complete bullshit that make no sense. So let's start with my story. And grief's a heavy topic. So at times we're going to get heavy, and I'm going to do my best with my limited comedic skills to try and crack in some dad jokes or shitty humor just to lighten things up a bit, because it's such a heavy topic, but it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't have to be, and I'll show you why. So my mother was the one who passed away, and I'm going to begin with the story of how it happened and then go into what our relationship was like. So she had COVID, like many of us, and I had COVID too, and believe what you want to believe about it. I do believe it was disease, the way it was handled. I believe all those conspiracies for sure, but it was a disease. I believe that. And I got it. And I have asthma, so my lungs were severely corrupted, but after a week I was normal. It felt like a sumo wrestler was sitting on my lungs. It was heavy, but it went away, right? My mom, I didn't give it to her. All right, so don't go point your fingers at me. But my mom had lung issues from COVID, like many of us, but she never got better, and it basically triggered some level of pneumonia and severe lung issues, and she just couldn't breathe very well. She was super sick, and we all thought it was some just complication or long COVID, or maybe she was dealing with some lung issues. And then my dad called me and said, hey, your mom's not doing well. Not in like a death way, like she's just very sick, she could use support. And I think it was her birthday or Mother's Day, one of the two. I show up to New York where my family lives, where I'm from, and she looks like a corpse. Pale, no energy. My mom is someone who's vibrant, beautiful. She literally embodies beauty internally and outside. Anyone who knew her was like, this is the most beautiful woman in the world, physically and internally. She was the divine feminine, and she looked dead. So that was shocking, but it never was a possibility in my mind that she could die. I was like, people get sick, and also I'm very spiritual. So to me, dis-ease is actually the body regulating itself and moving trauma or something that's happening. So I look at it as, oh, my mom is probably just shedding some demons, some trauma. And then she saw a doctor who basically said, hey, you might have cancer. I don't actually try and remember the details that much because it fucks me up thinking about the details, honestly. So I may not know the stories of my family. So I may get a little emotional and the details might sound a little over the place, but just because it wasn't one of my strategies trying to remember everything that happened that well. Because I do believe trauma is created by memory. So if I would try and access the memory to the highest level, it would just further ingrain the trauma. So bear with my shitty story recounting. So this doctor was like, hey, you may have cancer, but we don't know. And then that kind of fucked things up, because the earlier we would have found diagnosis, the earlier she would have been healed. So that guy kind of fucked up. I forgive him. It's all right. But she then got worse and worse, and she wanted to go to the hospital. And my certain family members were a little resistant to that, but she made that call, and thankfully she did. She gets to the hospital, and she's really sick. They don't know what the fuck's going on. And then it comes back that she basically has highly advanced cancer. I think it was lung, some combination of lung and uterus. I may have fucked that up again because my details are not great. But I remember I was I'm a fairly optimistic person, and I do believe in predestiny. So I knew that whatever was going to happen was going to happen. You can debate that later, and I understand why people resist to that. So I get it. It's a wild thing to believe, but it's my belief. So I was like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I can't do much about this. And it was middle of the night. I was sleeping with my ex-girlfriend, and then I got a knock on my door, and it was about 3 a.m. And my dad basically just breaks down. And, my dad's a pretty stoic man. That's where I get it from. So I haven't seen him fully break down. I've seen him tear up, at my sister's graduations and performances, but never to fully break down. I've never seen a man break down like that. And I'm not saying in a negative way. It just was like, holy shit, something's happening. So he broke down, and he was like, basically, your mom's dead. Not dead, but she's going to die. The chances of her dying are extremely high. And in that moment, it was just like, it finally became a reality that my mom's probably going to die. And that was a pretty shocking wake-up call. Nothing could really prepare you for that. The person you love the most, just hearing someone's dead and just hearing that she's going to die. And we don't know when, but it's going to happen. That's tough. And because it was a disease, it was like there's like some level of hope, but we don't know what we can't really quantify the hope. So that happens. I go back to sleep somehow, and then it's basically a countdown to death. We're in the hospital. All the diagnostics are happening. I'm trying to figure out how to heal her, and I can't remember the exact time frame. I think it was between 2 and 3 weeks in the hospital. Again, these facts can be fucked up. I don't know if they're true or not. From my memory, they are. Basically, the 3-week window was just basically spending time with her until she died. And the first week we were kind of hopeful, being like, we'll figure it out, we're going to fight. And then as time happened and time passed, she got worse and worse and worse. And eventually she, passed away in the hospital. So that was basically within a month. We heard she was sick, and then boom, dead. And, I saw her. I actually wasn't in the room when she passed away. I was out getting a salad somehow, and I had to run back. She was dead, flatlined. And yeah, just being in that room, seeing someone you love the most just dead, it's a pretty insane experience. Right? It was my dad, my sister, me, my cousin, who's basically my brother, my aunt, who's very close to us. We're all looking at the person we love the most in the world, just there, just dead. But the body's there. The body's there, and there's no life. And that image will never be taken away from. That image will never leave my brain. That's kind of stuck there. Revisiting it, I try and forget about it, but revisiting it is pretty devastating. And then there's life after that, and there's a life after seeing the person you love the most dead, and that's where grief begins. We had an open casket funeral, which is brutal, but it does give you some sense of closure. So that's pretty wild, just seeing someone you love the most, just a body, just no life in it. So that's the story, the actual chain of events. I'll go into how I actually felt in that moment and contextually where I was at in life. So up until that point, so at 21, I had a spiritual awakening. I was a drug addict. My brain was all fucked up. I was addicted to very many pharmaceuticals. I was stuck in my ego and had narcissistic tendencies. I was addicted to love in many ways. I was always had a good heart, but I had some serious demons. And thankfully, I healed that at 21. I started the path at 21, and around 20, so she died when I was 23 and change. And at that point, I cleared most of my trauma through various practices, somatic breath work, psychedelics, therapy, a number of things. So, and I also had a very, not enlightened, but rigid spiritual viewpoint on life. I believe in spirit. I believe in the afterlife. I've interviewed enough people where they've died and been in the afterlife, so I acknowledge this reality. And that served me, honestly. And I'd faced death many times. I'd had my own ego deaths in many ways. So it wasn't as intense and shocking as it was for people I love. It was painful. It was brutal. I was crying in my girlfriend's arms many times. But my spiritual practices made it so where it wasn't the end of life. It was very much, this hurts, but I understand why this is happening, and I can move forward. And that saved my ass. Like, if this happened to me when I was 21, I would have been in a mountain of fucking drugs and strippers. So I'm happy this happened when I was healed. So when she died, I know that basically trauma is created around how you perceive an event. So I knew that, or also how long it takes you to process the trauma itself. So the trauma for me was basically seeing her just like dead body there, and just seeing her basically die. She was the worst ones when she became lucid. She was on a bunch of drugs. So when she became lucid for moments and was like shocked and like screaming, like, I'm dying, for a moment, and then got kind of knocked out again, that was the most traumatizing for me. So I was like, okay. And the shock of losing the person who the most dying is a severe trauma. whatever people want to say about that, it is a severe trauma. So I knew that I have shit to heal myself from this experience. And I was like, okay, if you look at the 5 stages of grief, which are bullshit, but it is agreed upon, the mecca, the final point of grief is acceptance, right? And acceptance doesn't mean you don't feel the pain. It's like you just accept what happened, right? And you can move on with your life. Moving on doesn't mean being numb to it. It means living life as it would normally with the acceptance that the person is dead and feeling that from time to time and accepting it. Once you're in denial, you can't really heal. Acceptance basically opens the door towards healing. Denial shuts you off. So I was like, how the fuck can I get to acceptance as fast as possible? And that sounds like insane, like I'm denying the person's death. It's not the way I see it, right? I want to honor my mother's spirit and not have her be the cause of my misery. So I was like, how the fuck can I get to the fastest point of acceptance? And I ran an experiment. I was like, okay, if trauma exists in the body and trauma causes resistance towards acceptance, if I clear this trauma, I'll basically be in acceptance. And I did. I'll tell you exactly how throughout the steps, but I did. I didn't feel heavy about it. I really didn't. It was painful, but it wasn't like a bad experience. It wasn't like, it wasn't like I was like dreading life and suicidal and feeling terrible, which many people rightfully react to grief that way. And I totally get it. But for me, that wasn't the experience. And it wasn't the experience because I attacked the trauma. And so this is my layout for how to heal grief, how to deal with grief better. I don't think you can heal grief fully, but how to deal with grief in a way where you can honor the person's spirit as a source of joy and inspiration. And I think if anyone's dead, if I was dead, I want my fucking family to feel my spirit and be like, oh, Lucas was an amazing person. I'll use his energy and his memory to inspire myself to create beautiful things. Rather than so someone's dead body or spirit can be the cause of inspiration or destruction. The memory can inspire you to live a better life, or it can destroy you to live a worse life, right? I don't ever want to be someone's reason for destroying their own life, which many dead people are, which sucks. So this is my way of honoring my mom, is just trying to teach people hey, there's a way to deal with death where you can actually be inspired by them versus being destroyed by them. So there are 6 steps, and here we go. So the first one is basically, starts with the mind, the psyche. And again, perception is a big part in the trauma. So when we encounter a traumatic experience, I thought, what's the worst way I could think about this and perceive this event? Let me start there. What's the worst way I can think about this event? And the thought that immediately came to me was the victim mentality, right? So step 1 is a victim mentality creates a victim reality, especially when it comes to losing someone. No knock to my sister. I love her. She's great. But I use people I love as mirrors sometimes of how to deal with things, how to not deal with things. And she's dealt with it in amazing ways, which I'll go on to. Again, grief's a cool experiment because you can see how everyone in your family deals with it and which methods work or don't work. And she had a method that really worked, I'll return to. However, this one didn't really work. So I saw her immediately enter the victim mentality and how much suffering it was causing. And her thought process was, how can I lose a parent so young? How could she die so young? How could this happen to me? Why me? Why this thing? And I think anyone could have that reaction, right? Jesus even had the reaction when he was getting crucified. Why, God, why have thou forsaken me? Right? Even Jesus was like, for a second, like, yo, bro, what's good? What are you doing this shit, bro? So I think we all have a right to momentarily be like, why is this fucking shit happening? And that's a necessary step to healing. You have to kind of let that frustration vent itself and release it, but you can't get stuck there. So the truth is, I thought, when she was dying, I remember the day before she died, walking out and seeing a family of 4 of the nicest, most loving energy people devastated. They just lost their father. And there was 2 kids who were below 12. There was maybe like a 10 and 12-year-old and some other age in between. And I immediately thought, this is a human experience. Every single person in the world both will lose someone they love and will lose a parent. Every single person experiences this, so I am not a victim. How can I be a victim to something everyone experiences? It's a literal, integral part of the human experience. So I can't be a victim about this because it's not a victimhood reality. It's just not true, right? If the person was like brutally, savagely eaten by a lion, then maybe, and I saw it, then that's a crazy circumstance, but she died of cancer in a hospital, which is almost the most common way people go out nowadays. So I was like, I can't be a victim through this. And what does it do for me? If I live my life thinking, how could this have happened to me? She was so young. She died when I was 23. I only got 23 years of her beauty and her amazingness. Yeah, it fucking sucks. It sucks. I wish I could have spent more time with my mom. She was amazing. And I forgot to mention my relationship with her, so it's hard to fucking go all over the place, but it's a tricky topic. My mom and I have a very intense bond. You know, she all love to her. She fucked me up pretty good as a kid. And also blessed me in many ways. She taught me many spiritual truths and taught me how to love, but she blew hot and cold on me as a kid, which many parents do, but it's really devastating for a kid's nervous system. I feel very intensely loved and then feel very intensely rejected. And that wasn't her intention, and she didn't do it. I'm very sensitive, so any other kid in her position would have probably been fine, but I'm fucking crazy sensitive, so I perceived it as like very blowing hot and cold, which created a foundation in me where I didn't feel worthy of love from the feminine. And thankfully, she realized what she'd done. It wasn't the worst thing. Obviously, she didn't beat me, thank God, or do anything bad. But she spent a lot of time after the fact, I think when I turned 12 or 13, to be very invested. And we had a beautiful relationship. She was my best friend. She heard me. She listened to me. You know, I have a lot of crazy beliefs. And she, on the phone, whatever I thought, she listened to me. We talk about it. And she supported me unconditionally. No matter what I did in school, you know, I went from basically being kind of a loser in life to being a winner. Whatever you want that to mean, right? In this weird, strange world. I went to being bad in school, getting no girls, to being good in school, getting a lot of women, being good at sports, being attractive, and she never gave a fuck. She was like, I love you no matter what. You can fail classes, you can fail anything in life, you have my love. And that was the most beautiful thing I've experienced in my life, is that woman's love. Like, a mom's unconditional love, no matter what you do, is the most precious gift life can give you. And when it's torn away, it's devastating. It truly is devastating, but it's also a gift to give it to yourself. Right? And thank God my mom showed me how to unconditionally love, because now I can unconditionally love myself. And that's a gift she left me. So anyways, back to the victim mentality. It's a useless thought pattern. Like, what does it serve you thinking that shit? Like, how could this happen to me? My mom, oh yeah, I was saying, I have every reason to be a victim. I loved her so much. She was my best friend. She was amazing. But what does it serve me? What does it do for me to sit there being like, why me? Why my life so bad? She was so young. What does it do for me? It keeps me stuck in avoidance, basically, right? Any victim mentality makes you basically reject dealing with what's going on in your life, right? So the victim mentality for me would be, if I constantly believe that shit, that I was a victim to the circumstance, I would get stuck in that belief and not do anything to not be a victim, right? Being a victim is a mental choice, right? Things happen. The worst things can happen. They passed, right? You can stay stuck to them, be a victim, and stay stuck in that identity, and it's actually an addiction to be a victim, because then you're basically scapegoating, dealing with your shit. So once you're a victim, you plant the flag down, you're like, I'm not dealing with this shit by believing that this is just, how could this happen to me, right? So the first step to accepting reality is breaking the victim loop. Because you can't accept shit and make change if you're stuck to being a victim, right? Like, one thing, again, strange comparison, but I'm Hispanic. Both my parents are Latino immigrants, and obviously I look white, and I'm very privileged. You know, I'm financially privileged, many things. I get it, but I never ever allow myself to think of victim thought for race. Like, what does it do for me? If I believe that I can't get a job because I'm Hispanic, it keeps me stuck, right? I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to apply for that job or go for it because I'm Hispanic. I'm not going to get it. Like, what is that? It keeps me stuck, right? Like, the victim mentality keeps you stuck, right? If you ignore it, you can move forward in life. So That's the first step. Like the only way you can move forward with grief is to remove the victimhood of what happened, accept it, and then let's go. That's the mental first unlock to dealing with grief is I am not a victim to this. That's the first step. Once you accept it, you can start actually feeling it. And feeling it is what moves you towards accepting it in your body. There's logically accepting something, right? And there's in your body accepting it. You have to unlock the mind before the body can follow. So the mind is like, I'm not a victim. That can lead you to actually feel the grief to then process it. So, step 2, feeling it. What causes you to be stuck in grief is the resistance to process the emotions that came with the grief. So, let me explain. Any thought process, like victimhood, anger, shame about the death, thoughts of unworthiness, stem from unprocessed emotions, right? Emotion, your thoughts reflect your emotional state. That's a fact. So if your emotional state is trapped in trauma and victimhood and shame and anger and all these negative emotions, your mind will follow. So, and on top of that, there's 2 ways people deal with grief. They get stuck in the emotions or they deny them. So one way is like being so stuck in the victimhood, so stuck in the pain and the anger and all this stuff that your mind's constantly there, or you deny it. That a memory of the trauma of the for me, like a memory of seeing her pass away or a memory of the actual experience will come, and I would be like in the beginning, whoo, nah, bruh, I'm not dealing with this shit today. I got shit to do. I got shit to write. My life's so important. I can't possibly deal with grieving my mother. Like, well, I have to go be in the Matrix and be successful and get followers. That's the ego. It's the mind being saying that shit. But that's not true. Right? The most important thing is to actually process our pain. So, that step in feeling it is what breaks the resistance towards accepting it. Right? So, in that moment when that feeling or that thought comes up, the person who's dead, and you go to block it or become stuck to it, you got to break that pattern and allow yourself to the feeling to move through your body. Right? And people think they're feeling shit when they let's say you feel a wave of grief, but then you use that wave to think about the victimhood, or you think about how unrighteous it was or angry you are. Guess what you're doing? Guess what's happening when you're thinking about the thing in a negative situation, and you're stuck in your mind. You're not feeling the actual emotions. You're being like, oh, fuck this situation. What the fuck? My mom, Guess what you're not doing? Feeling it. So when you want to deny or latch on mentally onto an emotion that stems with grief, it's not feeling it. Right? You have to feel the emotion, and over time, if you feel it without mental latching to it, the trauma will gradually release. And the more you do that, the more the trauma will go away. So that's one way. When the actual memories or the thought processes or the emotions come, be in the body, lose the mind, lose the thinking patterns, the repression or the need to latch onto it, over-obsession. Repression and over-obsession, remove both in the mind, and just feel what is. Just feel it and be with it. If I want to scream, cry, get angry, feel that shit, right? Because the more you feel it, the more you'll be able to actually look at them in a positive light. Because what makes you look at them in a negative light, in a situation in a negative light, is the refusal to process the negative emotion. So that's one thing. However, what I did, and my story is, I did a somatic breathwork session the day after my mom died. What that means is it's basically a breathwork, 2-hour, if done properly, breathwork where you breathe fast enough and deep enough where you access DMT in your brain and your ego breaks away. So in your mind, there exists a barrier, and the barrier is your ego. And the ego will basically think constantly to not feel. It'll perceive situations and things in a way where you don't have to feel the pain. It keeps you in the comfort zone. So if you take psychedelics or you do somatic breathwork, the barrier breaks. Barrier is done. And when the barrier is gone, guess what happens? The emotions they just fucking fly out because you're not stopping yourself from feeling them. So I highly recommend, I'm not a huge fan of psychedelics, the work in this case, but somatic breath work fucking saved my ass when it comes to this, because it was brutal. I literally became the grief. I became the grief. I was there becoming the grief. And it was terrifying. I felt the terror of my inner child losing his mom. I felt the fucking anger I had at my mom for, leaving me, and I couldn't think about it, so I felt it. And that gives evidence what I'm saying, that you can't process a feeling or trauma if you're thinking about it all the time. You have to feel it. right? If you go to therapy and you're talking about my mom died and da-da-da-da-da, guess what you're not doing? You're intellectualizing an emotion that has to be processed. When you intellectualize emotions to be processed, you're not processing them. Processing is just feeling the emotion. That's what processing is. But in this weird intellectual world, we think processing is intellectualizing. Intellectualizing is not processing. Feeling is processing. Grief has to be felt to be processed, not thought about. So I recommend doing somatic breath work in pairing with feeling the triggers as they arise in a moment. Of course, it can be a lot and devastating and intense. I went all the way in. I did it. And when people tell me, I can't feel it, I can't do it. People tell me, Lucas, you're just a strong guy. You're just a strong person. I'm not buying that shit. I'm really not. I'm fucking sensitive. I'm very sensitive. I feel my emotions to an extreme level. I feel other people's emotions to an extreme level. It's possible. I did this shit. No one is too weak to feel their emotions, right? We're very good at avoiding them. And I'm not buying that shit where it's too intense for me. I can't do it. I don't buy that shit. I don't. No emotion is too intense to feel. You can process it. The belief that you can't feel it is what doesn't let you feel it. The belief that it's intense is what doesn't let you feel it. You can feel your emotions. You can feel your grief. You are able to do it. It's never too intense. The belief that it's too intense will keep you from not feeling it. So the next step, which is the biggest life hack and requisite to actually feeling it, is step 3, opening your heart. So there's 2 ways to go at pain. Pain can break you down or break you open. And if you don't know what I'm saying, think about a breakup with an ex, right? In that moment, you were devastated, right? Let's say they cheated on you. And use that experience to break down, be a victim, and say, how can I attract a cheater? What the fuck? This guy's a piece of shit. He's a narcissist. I'm not defending the person's actions, but you break down, and the pain is causing you to break down. There's another way, right? There's the way that pain can actually break your heart open, where you can, in the same exact experience, can be perceived in a way where it's like, wow, I now know what I'm worth. I don't know what I'm worth, and I'm going to feel this pain, but I'm going to allow it to break my heart open, to show me what I'm worth, and to not allow myself to date someone like that. You can allow pain to break you down or break you open. And I can speak to this because the wildest psychedelic experience happened to me while she was dying, and I was dead sober. So every day I'd go to the hospital for a couple hours. That's all I could. That's all I could manage really, and not go insane. My dad was there basically, 18, 17 hours a day, no, maybe less, but almost all day. The dude went insane in a good way because he loved her so much. I would have done the same thing for my wife, but he was going insane. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way, I mean that in a loving way. I had to basically, go in for enough time where I could have habits and do things in life where I wouldn't go insane and allow myself to actually process what I was going through. I couldn't process it if I was constantly looking at death. So anyways, one of the times I was seeing her in a very vulnerable state, I left the hospital and everything in that moment became love. I literally became aware of the fact that everything in this universe or in this simulation call or in this life is activated with the charge of love. God is love. That's what I knew in that moment. I saw a stop sign. I literally see the stop sign vibrating. My heart was like pouring love to it. I saw a human being I saw like a aggressive crackhead, and I would literally look at them and I see the God in them being like, this person just experienced pain as a kid and they're worthy of love, and everything, the rat on the street, the pavement, the dirt, the buildings, everything became coated with love. And I was like, what the fuck is causing this experience? I realized, wow, in this human dimension, our hearts grow and our personality develops through pain. It doesn't make it a fun fact that it's happening, but pain can break your heart. Pain breaks your heart open if you allow it to. Pain can break you down and make you a bad person if you allow it to, right? A hero and a villain have the same origin story. The hero uses the pain to develop. The villain uses the pain to not develop and to basically perpetuate the pain. The hero wants to heal the pain in others. So that experience broke my heart open to the highest level. And that made the experience a whole lot easier, right? Once I had the perspective, like, how can this grief break my heart open. And it's all in us, right? If you look at the symbolism of Jesus on the cross, why is Jesus on the cross at the focal point of every church, right? There's many different reasons I can explain in other videos, but for this topic, Jesus represents basically like the person that Christians love the most. I love Jesus too. I'm not a Christian, but I love Jesus. And the archetype of Jesus is just the most loving person. It just literally, he embodies unconditional love. So when we see the person we love the most nailed to a cross and suffering, guess what it does? It opens the heart to the highest level. When you're open heart, you can connect to divinity and the Holy Spirit to the highest level. So I experienced that when I saw my mom dying, which is the person I love the most. A heart opened, right? But unfortunately, human beings limit that skill to others, where if I can only feel that love from seeing someone in pain and having my heart open when I see Jesus or I see my mom or my grandma sick. But what if you apply that same perspective to yourself, right? Your heart can also open if you look at yourself with the same compassionate lens, right? Look at yourself the way you look at Jesus on the cross. Look at yourself the way you look at your grandma sick, or you look at your kids sick. That's possible. Once you do that for yourself, you can have compassion for yourself. Once you have compassion, the heart opens. And leading to my next step, the main culprit of a heart breaking down is a lack of forgiveness. So, step 4, forgive. This may sound crazy, but it is a truth in my experience and in analyzing other people who I've helped who are dealing with grief. You have to forgive the person for dying. That sounds crazy because they didn't choose to die, but it's a reality for 2 reasons. The first, which is less esoteric, the portion of your psyche, which is a big portion of your inner child, can't rationalize the fact that they're dead. They can't. They perceive it as, this person abandoned me, especially if it's a parent, right? My inner child was like, Mom, you abandoned me through dying. It's obviously not true, but it doesn't matter because my inner child perceives it that way. So there's a piece of you where you have to forgive the person for dying. It sounds insane, but I swear it's true. Once I sat down, I was like, I forgive you, Mom, for dying. My inner child was free. It felt much more compassionate, less angry about the situation. Furthermore, this is where, again, if you are not spiritual, I try to make this lecture open and accessible to people who are not spiritual, but I am spiritual, and I do believe in our souls. I do believe that our souls choose our destiny. I do believe that my soul chooses when I die and how it'll happen. So with that spiritual knowledge, again, you don't have to agree with me. I get it. It sounds crazy. But for those who are spiritual, who believe that stuff, you have to basically talk to the Spirit and forgive them and understand that you also called in that experience. That I called in an experience where my mom would die at 23, and she called in an experience where she'd have a very close relationship with her son, and she would pass away before she saw him develop into the man I am now. It's brutal, but I had to forgive her spirit. I had to tell her spirit, I forgive you. I understand why you did this. It's okay. And once I did that, my heart opened, right? A lack of forgiveness is what closes the heart. Forgiving someone opens the heart, right? If you're ever mad at someone, you can't basically love them until you forgive them. It's just a requisite. If you think like you're mad at a partner for doing something, that anger doesn't go away until you forgive them. It's the same with any painful situation. I had to forgive my mom for dying. So first step, forgive the person for dying. Again, it sounds wild, but it's a requisite in actually opening your heart. And secondly, you have to forgive the circumstances that caused the death. So that was especially hard for me because I am very well versed in healing, in natural healing. I healed various severe health issues, eczema, asthma, a whole DSM list of mental illness, overweight issues, you name it. I've healed it all naturally. I haven't taken a pharmaceutical physical health medication in 6 years. Nothing. And I'm as healthy as I've ever been. And that's because I'm well versed in health. I interview people for a living who know about this shit. So I knew that I believe hospitals are where people go to die, because the health industry has no fucking clue what health is. It knows what fixing a temporary issue is, but not dealing with the root issue. And they do that in whatever way they're taught. They match a symptom to a drug, which has other side effects, which they need a drug to deal with. It's like you basically go to the hospital with the issue, and instead of finding the culprit, they basically keep giving you different meds to see what works, and then diagnose and then treat the side effects from that. It's like a fucking little domino falling of like different pills fucking up your health. So I knew that once I went to the hospital, I saw they're pumping her full of opioids and antibiotics, and giving her shakes that were basically consisted of literal canola oil and whey GMO protein. That was a shake. Ensure protein. It's literal fucking canola oil and shitty protein. That was her food source. And like dessert. And I knew that was gonna kill her. I was like, literally, she's dead. And the doctors were killing her, I believe. And when I approached my father or family with my theories as to what to do, they ignored me and laughed at me and basically like, Lucas, shut up. And that really hurt me. It still hurts me. Because my inner child and part of me believes I could have saved her. If I do believe that, one of my best friends, James, mom had a similar thing, suddenly diagnosed with cancer. He took her out of the hospital and put her in natural treatments, and she lived. And that's amazing for him. That's so awesome for him, and I'm glad he has that experience. But hearing that, a couple months ago, I was like, fuck, man. I could have done that shit if I was listened to. That's still a really hard reality to deal with. I don't think I'll ever recover from that. But then there's like not recovering from that fact and feeling bad about it, but there's also the reality that I had to forgive everything. One of my favorite passages of Jesus' teachings, I'm probably butchering the quote, but it's like, forgive them for they not know what they do. That applies to almost any single person committing something bad. They don't know what they're doing. How can I be mad at someone for having a lack of knowledge? So the doctors have no clue what they're doing because they're educated to basically kill people. So it's not their fault. It's the system's fault. So I forgave the doctors immediately. I was like, I forgive you, doctors. I see your heart. I know you're not trying to do wrong. I forgive you. I forgive the doctor who missed a diagnosis, could have saved her. I forgive my father for believing the mainstream health system, because why wouldn't he? He's a very smart, rational person. Why would he believe what I believe, which is very esoteric, spiritual truth? I believe that disease is caused by trauma. They're caused by emotional dis-ease. So I believe healing disease is actually healing trauma and emotions. So 99% of people don't believe that. So I can't be mad at someone for not believing that. I forgive everyone, and it happened. I forgive my mom too for she knew. I believe she knew better. But maybe she didn't. Maybe I don't know why she was drinking those shakes, but I don't know. So I forgive them all. I forgive them. I have no anger towards them. I still haven't forgiven myself, and that's something I'm not good at. I'm very good at forgiving others, but I'm very bad at forgiving myself. And I still find it hard to forgive myself for not pushing harder. I was a coward. I cowered down. My dad shut me down. I shut myself down. When I tried to say to my mom was listening, but I could have pushed harder. And even though I know that this thing happened the way it happened, it was predestined, and I couldn't have changed anything, it's still hard for me to forgive myself for not pushing harder. Because I believe that if my protocols were followed, she would have been alive today. And that's something I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for, which is tough. And I'm working on it. So I'm doing this with you guys. Once you forgive the person for dying and forgive the circumstances, the next step is much easier to manifest, which is committing to a higher path of grief, which is there's two choices in grief. Again, I mentioned earlier, you can allow the person to be a source of inspiration or a source of destruction. they become a source of destruction when the forgiveness piece isn't there, right? Once you have anger and you have animosity or victimhood towards the death, the destructive path is created. Once you forgive and have your heart open, the higher path opens, which is, the higher path is remembering their spirit with joy, and using the memory as a source of inspiration. That can only happen once your heart is open, you've forgiven, you've healed the trauma, and the victim mentality goes away. So once you've forgiven, the higher path can open up. And the higher path, which is step 6, is purpose. And this is where I'll give kudos to my sister. The best way I've dealt with emotional pain and trauma is creating purpose from the pain. So the best way to do that is when you have trauma and energetic imbalances and neuroses from painful events, imagine yourself as a drawing. It's like, look at me right now. Where are you? When you have trauma with no outlet, you have all the energetic, demonic, painful outlets, all the arrows of trauma are pointing towards you. There's no outlet. It's just like literal, the electric signal, the electric flow of the trauma is all pouring into you. How can we actually move that out? Beyond somatic breathwork, psychedelics, what's a good way to actually move the trauma out? Art. Artistic creation. Painting, writing, speaking. Creativity is the medicine God created for us to deal with our pain. The best art comes from trauma. The best songs come from trauma. The best paintings come from trauma, because the pain informs the art. Therefore, art is the medical solution to most people's ailments. I swear if people actually created art from their pain before going to a therapist or a doctor or a psychiatrist, their issue would go away. It sounds insane. I'm telling you it's the reality. Speaking of my sister, she has just created a play that's going on this summer called, I'm forgetting, but I'll link it in the show notes, about grief, about her experience with grief and how people deal with grief, specifically revolving around my mother's death. And that's a perfect example. She literally wrote a play about death, about her experience with death. And she literally took the grief, the terrible situation, and made an amazing play out of it, which is going on, amazing theater company this summer in New York City. So DM me if you want tickets. I got you. It's worth seeing. On Instagram. Do you want an Instagram? My Instagram's down below. She made a play out of it. My expression of that was, my mom wanted to be a healer, but she didn't have the confidence to do so. So and to speak about her knowledge, with spiritual knowledge. So my ode to her, my dedication to her is this. All that energy, all that pain, all that grief is going towards here. My mission is to heal people, to help people. And that was her mission too. So I'm doing this through her. Her spirit is speaking through me. She's my muse. That's my dedication. The mind cannot make sense of fucking loss. It can't. It just can't. You can't even think about what happened and ever make sense out of it. I've tried. I failed many times. But you have to move the energy somehow. If you're trying to think about it, you're stuck. The only way you can unstuck yourself is to not even think about it and to actually release the pain through artistic expression, right? If you try and release the pain through thinking about it, it just stays stuck. If you release the pain through art and expression and singing and painting and writing, the trauma moves, right? Like there's a Jungian belief that the archetype of darkness is labeled as Wetiko, and the belief is that Wetiko is here to stimulate human art. That call it God, call it divinity, created the darkness in our psyches to stimulate artistic expression or healing, right? I can't deny that fact. And, I want to end this episode. I would summarize all this, but I've yapped on for too long. And it has the chapters should be in the video. But I want to end with a message of, again, talk about this shit with people. You cannot heal alone. We think that we can heal grief alone. I can think about it in my thoughts by myself in my room and cry alone in my closet, and grief will go away. Fuck no. Grief goes away once dealt with others. And I'm not telling you to go to a grief support group. Literally, just talk about it. Talk about death, your close ones dying with other people. They'll love it. They'll want to talk about it. And that's the only way we can heal, right? If you use grief as an excuse to just not talk about it and be isolated and never deal with it, you're losing the most beautiful way to connect with someone. connecting with another human being over loss, you can experience it, is the most intimate, connecting experience ever. Please go out there and talk to people about grief. It's the only way we can make sense out of it and deal with it. I want to see a culture where grief and death is honored as a part of life. We can do that. We can do this. Talk to people about death. You'll get closer to them. You'll bond with them. I promise. I hope this episode helped. I hope I didn't yap too much about my own experiences and really explained the steps well enough. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Leave me a like and a comment with, I like it for sure, but a comment with what aspect resonated with you. You know, what component of the steps made sense to you, didn't make sense, and tell me your story. Write down your experience with grief, and I'll respond to you. Let's connect over this experience. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to watch more content, please click this video right here and don't forget to subscribe right here. Thank you.